Aniplex.
We're doing this again, aren't we? If anyone frequents this channel enough, you'll know that I talk about the licensing side of the industry a lot. I do find this stuff legitimately very interesting, which is why I focus on it, but also I feel like the general consumer needs to be aware of what's going on with the companies that control all the anime we want. If you've been on this channel for a good while, you'll remember I did a video on Aniplex in 2017. It was based on what was going on at the time, and it's not completely outdated, it's surprisingly still relevant, but a lot of things have changed since then, which is why I'm making this one. I will be slightly referring back to it since I explained their business model in it, so you may want to check it out if you haven't already. But if you don't, to give you the Cliff Notes version, Aniplex makes money by selling incredibly overpriced home video releases of really popular anime. Since those series have a crazy number of fans, usually millions, if a small percentage of them even buy these releases, which are over $100, Aniplex still makes a really high profit with a very small pool of people. It's a smart business strategy, but the problem is that it only caters to mega popular shows. If you're even slightly niche, you're gonna get very little attention. Now that we cleared the basics, we cannot talk about everything they are doing. We're gonna be talking about a lot of different things that don't really connect to each other, so it's gonna be pretty scattered. You're gonna have to bear with me on this one. So, let's begin. Funny enough, hopping back to 2017, Sony bought out Funimation for $150 million, which means it was no longer an independent company and it was now under a massive corporation. Many, me included, didn't know what this meant or what it was gonna do, so we were all worried. Skipping over to 2019, Sony announces a quote-unquote merger across all their anime companies to distribute more anime globally. This is because earlier in the year, Aniplex acquired the anime division of the Australian company Madman, and they also had the French streaming company Wakanim since 2015. But here's why I say quote-unquote merger. Merger implies that all of them are being combined into a single company where they work together. This isn't the case. They're all still separate companies doing their own things, but now under the umbrella of Sony, which is a pretty important detail in why I would call this more of a joint venture rather than a merger. But the big thing that comes from this is that they all have access to each other's content because they are technically the same company now. So now we can finally talk about Aniplex. With the joint venture, Aniplex benefits a lot because of Funimation. All of their catalog is now going to be on a single streaming service. Before this, they would have a lot of their shows scattered across many that it would be a hassle to watch them dubbed officially. The only place they would for sure put everything on would be Netflix, but it would usually take a few months until that happened. Netflix is still going to have Aniplex shows, but there's now going to be a quicker way to access them, especially the more recent ones that are currently airing, and that's with Funimation. One of their biggest complaints for years is that they never had a more reasonable alternative to purchase any of their shows because it would go against their business model. Now that they're working with Funimation, they're using them to release more affordable versions of them. Demon Slayer being the first, and this is on the side of their super pricey collector's editions. And yeah, these two things are really good and I definitely don't have a problem with them. But there's been something that's been bothering me for a really long time. We're gonna have to start with Persona 5 the animation. And at this point, you've probably seen dozens of videos about the Blu-ray and how overpriced it is. And while this is usual Aniplex, what makes this a different situation is that all their other shows that they released like this were at least of decent quality. I know that can be super subjective, especially with some of the shows on here, but I mean this more in a production sense, that they're very high polished shows in their looks and animation. And because of this polish, they still have a somewhat positive reception. But the main thing here is that I always associated quality with these pricey collector's editions. Persona 5 the animation goes against all of this. There's a ton of videos that explain how bad it is really well, so I'm not gonna go into it myself. But it's one of the rare cases where you can easily tell that this was a much cheaper show with very little work put into it. Everyone pretty much agrees that this show is bad, which is why the Blu-ray is insane. This is the main point for a lot of the videos I just mentioned, but the thing for me is how it correlates to Kaguya-Sama Love is a War. Kaguya is a critically loved series that's really popular because the manga it's based on is really well written and its adaptation is really good as well. But Aniplex didn't think it was good enough for them to dub, so they just gave it to Funimation, instead putting a critically panned show as the priority because it's associated to an insanely popular series. They also knew that fans really wanted a dub for Kaguya-Sama, so it just being announced, no one would really care who was doing it because it was actually happening. When I talked about their business model, there was never anything to confirm it, and it was more of an observation I gained from keeping up with them for so many years. The Kaguya-Sama dub pretty much confirmed this because it came 20 days after the Persona 5 announcement. It's why the dub feels kinda icky to me because it doesn't feel genuine. And I don't mean this in the script adaptations or performances, but more in how the main company just wasn't behind it and gave it to somebody else. This especially leaves a bad taste in my mouth because of the number of great smaller shows that they never did anything with. Some of these still don't have Blu-ray releases, just saying. Also, the Persona 5 dub happened the same year that both Kaguya-Sama and Bunny Girl Senpai didn't get a dub for their Aniplex home video releases. These two critically praised series were not good enough for them, but Persona 5 the animation was. Just think about that for a second. And speaking of that, the Kaguya-Sama dub makes the Blu-ray really awkward. Funimation started the dub at season 2 since it was part of the current season of anime and they could just add it to their simuldub lineup. They are going to go back and do season 1 at a later time, but the thing is that if anyone bought season 1 Blu-ray, which is $100, it immediately became outdated 4 months after its release. It now has less features than the eventual standard release, which is crazy because it's gonna be cheaper. I know a lot of you guys don't like dubs and probably don't care since you were never gonna watch it, and it's totally valid to think that, but the main point is if you bought it, you were tricked into buying a premium complete product by a massive corporation, and the only way to complete it now is by rebuying a cheaper version and giving that massive corporation even more money. Yeah, that doesn't feel good, does it? Persona 5 the Animation's Blu-ray is also really bad in another way. It's one of the worst releases I've ever seen for a number of reasons. First off, the presentation of it is really boring. The case art just being the characters on a red background and red discs. And I know they have patterns on them, but they're really hard to see. The main Blu-ray art is really bad because it has a massive spoiler on it, and aside from that, it just doesn't look great. But the main thing is how little it comes with just being art cards. 12 is a lot and they are double-sided, but one side of them are just PNGs of the characters on a red background. For the price tag of $300, $400 depending on the store, this is insane. I know this comes off as typical Aniplex, which is why no one cares, but it's not. Funny enough, there is a really similar situation to compare it to, and that's Persona 4 The Golden Animation. Both being anime adaptations of popular JRPGs from the Persona franchise done by A1 Pictures with a really similar reception licensed by Aniplex. So if we take a look at that home video release, it's a night and day difference. Coming with a 24-page booklet, 6 art cards as well as the original soundtrack, and this is for each one. Just one of these on its own is a better deal. Just looking at all of this, you're most likely thinking it's super expensive, but it's actually $80. Completing Persona 4 The Golden Animation will cost you $160, and with the amount of extras it comes with, it's pretty reasonable. Some may argue that it's much cheaper because it's half the length of P5 The Animation. Being only 12 episodes, then that's a fair point. So let's compare it to a show with a closer episode count. Gurren Lagann. The entire 27 episode series plus the 2 movies nets you $150. Again, I can see people arguing that it comes with no extras, which is why it's so cheap. But even if I look at the original multi-part set, each volume came with a double-sided poster of art from the show, as well as booklets full of interviews with the staff and even more art inside of them. Completing the entire set would cost you $250, which is still cheaper than Persona 5 The Animation. I can do this all day comparing other sets to it, but no matter what angle you look at it, it's just not good. I've bought anime for $20 that comes with more art cards than Persona 5. Aniplex purposely made a subpar release with a tremendous price tag for what they know is a mediocre show to take advantage of the fans that love this series, because some will support it regardless of the quality. This is especially evident coming after the Demon Slayer Standard Edition since they purposely chose not to have that alternative for P5. The main reason I wanted to make this video is that Aniplex is using Funimation as a guise to hide all the shady things they're doing, and it's working. 20 days was enough time for most people to forget about the P5 Blu-ray, but then the Kaguya-Sama dub announcement completely overshadowed it. A ton of people wanted to watch the dub of P5 but didn't want to pay for it, but it becoming available through Funimation gave them easy access to it. Because of that, a lot of people fell in love with it, and mostly it's the only redeemable thing about the anime. I've seen a lot of people online contemplate buying the Blu-ray because of it. Also, I don't think the mind game goes this far, but a happy accident of doing this makes it that when you search up Persona 5 The Animation on YouTube, many of the videos that criticize the anime are now buried with clips from the dub. A lot of the things they're doing feels like evil big corporation, which I never thought I would see when it came to anime. They're doing a lot of things that are anti-consumer with the front of giving fans what they want, which is why I'm so heated about this. I just want to stress that Funimation is in no way part of all the shady things they're doing and are just an unsuspecting third party. If another company came to you and said you have access to all their shows to dub and sell, I'm pretty sure you would take advantage of that. But in this situation, Aniplex is benefiting the most because of everything I mentioned, as well as having a way to profit off all the shows they had no interest in. We're seeing that with superheroes, since this is a hardcore ecchi anime that is a no-go for Aniplex, but the usual for Funimation. The scary thing about all of this is that we're in a make-or-break situation. If Persona 5 the animation in any way sells well, we'd be telling them that it's okay for them to do this again with other low-quality shows, perpetuating their awful business model and if anything making it worse. If more garbage shows get released like this in the future, it's easy to figure out why. But I did say make or break, so there is a silver lining. Since Funimation will be releasing standard versions of all their smaller shows, if those sold really well, it would be an easy way to tell Aniplex to drop their popularity-based model and just focus on shows that are actually good. Persona 5 has to do poorly in every way possible, not only to stop them from all the shady things they're doing, but if that show fails really hard while all their smaller shows are really successful, at the same time, it would be the easiest way for them to see what we want. I don't know what Funimation will be releasing in the future from them, but Aniplex does have a big library of shows they can't do anything with, so I wouldn't be surprised if they go back and re-release some of them. This is the only positive I can see in all of this, and while the thought of having Servant X Service, Baccano, and Persona 4 the animation in my collection makes me happy, a part of me is always gonna feel gross knowing that to achieve this was by tricking fans and purposely mishandling shows that deserve better. I can't really think of anything worse than what's going on with Aniplex.